Asterisk. Asterisk document. Part 6 of the Empire's best faced a human mechanic. And lost to a wrench. Asterisk. Asterisk. The sun rose over Iron Haven, casting long shadows across the colony. The orange glow bathed the makeshift barricades in piles of scrap metal in a warm light, but there was no warmth in the air. Tension hung heavy like a storm waiting to break. The colonists moved with purpose, their faces set in grim determination as they prepared for the inevitable clash ahead. Ethan Cole stood near the edge of the main square, watching as people worked together to fortify their defenses. Some welded steel plates onto barricades, while others carried crates of supplies into secure locations. Children helped where they could, handing tools to adults or stacking rocks to block narrow alleyways. It was a community united by necessity, each person playing their part in the fight for survival. Laura Bennett approached him, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "We've reinforced the perimeter," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But it's not going to hold forever. If the Empire brings more ships or worse, ground troops were outnumbered." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I know. But we've got something they don't expect. Creativity. We'll use what we have to make them think twice about attacking." Laura hesitated, then asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "How much time do you think we have?" Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his greasy hair. "Not enough. Their reinforcements are probably already on the way. When they get here, they'll hit us hard. We need to be ready." Laura could respond. Carl jogged up to them, his face flushed from exertion. "Ethan, we've got another problem." One of the scouts spotted movement outside the colony, Imperial forces regrouping near the old refinery. Ethan's jaw tightened. "How many?" "Hard to say," Carl replied. "At least a dozen, maybe more. They're setting up some kind of equipment. Looks like they're trying to repair their comms." Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. If the Empire restored communication with their fleet, it would only be a matter of time before reinforcements arrived in full force. They couldn't let that happen. "I'll take care of it," Ethan said firmly. "Gather a team, I'm heading out." Laura stepped forward, her expression worried. "Ethan, you can't keep doing this alone. Every time you go out there, you risk getting caught or worse." "I'm not doing it alone," Ethan countered. "And I'm not planning on getting caught. Besides, if we don't stop them now, we won't stand a chance later." Laura opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. She knew Ethan well enough to recognize the stubbornness in his tone. Instead, she sighed and nodded. "Just be careful. We need you here." Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry. I'll be back." Rachel Monroe stood near the abandoned refinery, overseeing her soldiers as they worked to restore their communication systems. The night had been long and frustrating, filled with setbacks and delays. But now, with the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon, progress was finally being made. Her Lieutenant Peters approached her, saluting sharply. "Captain, we've managed to patch the transmitter. We should have limited contact with the fleet within the hour." Rachel nodded, though her expression remained cold. "Good. Once we re-establish communication, inform Commander Hale of our situation and request immediate reinforcements. Tell him we've located the alien device and require extraction." "Yes, ma'am," Peters replied, hurrying off to relay the message. Rachel turned her attention back to the task at hand. The refinery was a crumbling structure, its walls covered in rust and grime. It wasn't ideal, but it provided cover, and that was all she needed. As her soldiers continued working, Rachel scanned the surrounding area, her sharp eyes searching for any sign of movement. She didn't have to wait long. A faint glint of light caught her attention, a reflection off metal in the distance. Narrowing her eyes, Rachel spotted figures moving cautiously through the rocky terrain. At their center was Ethan Cole, his wrench slung over his shoulder like a weapon. Rachel smirked, raising her rifle. "Cole," she muttered under her breath. "You just never learn, do you, Ethan?" Led a small group of colonists toward the refinery, keeping low to avoid detection. Each step was deliberate, their movements slow and measured. Jake carried a backpack filled with explosives, while Maria kept watch, her rifle trained on the refinery's entrance. Ethan gripped his wrench tightly, his mind racing with plans. When they reached a safe vantage point, Ethan signaled for the group to stop. He crouched behind a boulder, peering out at the refinery. Imperial soldiers milled about, their weapons drawn as they guarded the makeshift communications array. Rachel stood nearby, her posture rigid and commanding. "We need to disable that transmitter," Ethan whispered, turning to Jake. "Can you rig it to blow?" Jake nodded, already pulling out wires and detonators. "Give me 10 minutes. At 5, Ethan replied. "If they spot us, we're done for." As Jake began assembling the explosives, Ethan turned to Maria. "Keep an eye on Monroe. If she moves, we move." Maria nodded, her gaze fixed on Rachel. "Got it." Rachel watched as Ethan's group moved closer, their movements cautious but deliberate. She signaled for her soldiers to prepare, raising her rifle and aiming directly at Ethan. "So predictable," she muttered, her finger tightening on the trigger. Before she could fire, a loud explosion rocked the area. Smoke billowed into the air as one of the refinery's outer walls collapsed, sending debris flying in all respects to write the next part of the story, continuing from where the previous section left off. Here's the smooth continuation. The explosion sent shockwaves rippling through the refinery, throwing dust and rubble into the air. Rachel stumbled back, shielding her face as chunks of concrete rained down around her. Her soldiers scrambled for cover, their disciplined formation crumbling in the chaos. Amidst the confusion, Ethan seized the opportunity. "Move!" he shouted to his team, darting forward with surprising speed. Jake sprinted toward the communications array, clutching his bag of explosives, while Maria provided covering fire, her rifle cracking sharply against the morning silence. Bullets whizzed past Ethan's head, striking sparks off nearby metal, but he pressed on, his focus unwavering. Rachel recovered quickly, her military training kicking in. She barked orders to her men, directing them to flank Ethan's group. "Don't let them disable the transmitter," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. Raising her rifle, she fired a burst of shots, forcing Ethan to duck behind a pile of debris. Ethan cursed under his breath, peeking out to assess the situation. Jake was almost at the transmitter, but Imperial soldiers were closing in fast. Time was running out. Thinking quickly, Ethan grabbed a loose pipe lying on the ground and hurled it at the nearest soldier. The distraction worked. The soldier ducked, giving Jake precious seconds to reach the array. "Almost there," Jake called out, his hands trembling as he attached the explosives to the base of the transmitter. The device hummed ominously, its circuits sparking as Jake connected the final wire. "Done. Let's go." Ethan waved for Maria to fall back, then turned to Jake. "Light it up." With a nod, Jake pressed the detonator. A second explosion tore through the refinery, engulfing the transmitter in flames. The blast knocked everyone off their feet, sending waves of heat rolling across the battlefield. Smoke choked the air, making it hard to see or breathe. When the dust settled, Ethan rose shakily to his feet, coughing as he brushed ash from his jacket. Around him, the refinery lay in ruins, its skeletal remains smoldering in the early morning light. The colonists regrouped, their faces streaked with soot, but triumphant nonetheless. Rachel Monroe emerged from the wreckage, her uniform singed and her expression livid. She staggered slightly, clutching her rifle tightly. Her soldiers gathered around her, battered, but still armed. For a moment, she simply stared at Ethan, her gray eyes blazing with fury. "You're persistent," she growled, stepping forward. "This isn't over, Cole." Ethan met her gaze, his grip tightening on his wrench. "No, it's not. Every time you try something, we'll be here to stop you." Rachel clenched her jaw, frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior. She knew Ethan was right. The colonists had proven themselves resourceful and resilient. Defeating them wouldn't be easy, especially without reinforcements. Still, she refused to admit defeat. "Not yet. Fall back." Rachel ordered her men, her voice sharp. "We'll regroup and come at them from another angle." Her soldiers obeyed, retreating into the shadows as Rachel cast one last glare at Ethan. Then she turned and disappeared into the ruins, leaving the colonists victorious for now. Back in the colony, the mood was somber but hopeful. The destruction of the transmitter had dealt a significant blow to the Empire's efforts, but everyone knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Reinforcements were still on the way, and when they arrived, the battle would escalate. Ethan addressed the colonists in the main square, his voice steady despite the fatigue etched on his face. "We did good today," he said, looking out at the crowd. "But this fight isn't over. Empire won't give up, not after what we've done. We need to stay vigilant, stay united, and keep fighting for our home." The colonists nodded, their expressions resolute. They had faced impossible odds before and come out on top. This time would be no different. Laura joined Ethan, her lab coat stained with grease and *** document. Part 1 of the Empire's best faced, a human mechanic, and lost to a wrench *** in the vastness of space. Where stars burned like distant lanterns and planets drifted silently in their orbits, there existed an empire. It was not just any empire, but one that stretched across galaxies, swallowing worlds whole and bending them to its will. The ruler of this colossal domain was Emperor Alaric Kane, a man whose name inspired both fear and awe. The soldiers wore sleek black armor, their helmets gleaming under artificial lights as they marched through conquered territories. His ships were massive, bristling with weapons capable of destroying moons. And yet, despite all his power, there was one thing Emperor Kane could never fully control: humanity. Humanity had been scattered across the stars for centuries, pushed to the edges of known space by the Empire's relentless expansion. Many humans lived on remote colonies, eking out meager existences on barren planets or mining asteroids for precious resources. These colonies were often ignored by the Empire, unless they posed a threat or until someone made a mistake big enough to draw attention. That was exactly what happened on Ironhaven. Ironhaven was a small outpost located at the farthest reaches of Imperial space. It wasn't much to look at, just a cluster of rusted buildings surrounded by endless fields of jagged rocks and dusty plains. The air smelled of oil and burnt metal, and the sky was always tinged orange from the nearby sun. Most people who lived there didn't care about grand adventures or heroic deeds. They cared about survival. They mined or repaired machines and tried to stay out of trouble. But Ethan Cole was different. Ethan was a mechanic, though calling him that felt almost too simple. He wasn't just someone who fixed things, he understood them. From the moment he could walk, he had been fascinated by how machines worked. As a child, he would take apart old toys, studying each piece until he figured out how to put them back together again. When he grew older, he turned his curiosity toward bigger challenges: broken engines, malfunctioning robots, even the occasional a starship that limped into Ironhaven looking for help. No matter what the problem was, Ethan found a way to solve it. People trusted him, relied on him, sometimes even joked that if Ethan couldn't fix something, no one could. On this particular day, Ethan was hunched over a pile of scrap metal. In his workshop, muttering to himself as he tinkered with a strange device. It wasn't like anything he'd seen before. The colonists had found it weeks earlier while scavenging parts from a derelict alien ship that had crash-landed nearby. At first glance, it looked like a chunk of twisted metal, useless and forgotten. But Ethan knew better. Beneath its dented surface lay intricate circuits and glowing panels that pulsed faintly with energy. Whatever it was advanced far beyond anything humans had built. And Ethan couldn't resist the challenge. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. Around him, tools lay scattered on the workbench, some shiny and new, others worn down from years of use. The workshop itself was cluttered, but organized in a way only Ethan could understand. Shelves lined the walls, stacked high with spare parts, wires, and manuals written in languages he barely recognized. A half-finished robot stood in the corner, its single eye blinking lazily as if waiting for Ethan to finish assembling it. But today, his focus was entirely on the mysterious device. As Ethan worked, he noticed something unusual. There was a small indentation near the base of the object, almost hidden by layers of grime. Carefully, he scraped away the dirt with a flathead screwdriver, revealing a tiny switch. His heart raced as he hesitated. What if pressing it triggered something dangerous? Alien technology was unpredictable after all. But curiosity got the better of him. With a deep breath, he flipped the switch, For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hum, the device came alive. Panels lit up, casting eerie blue light across the room. Holograms flickered into existence above the object, displaying complex diagrams and symbols that danced in midair. Ethan leaned closer, squinting. At the images, they seemed to depict some kind of weapena, sleek, cylindrical device with rows of lenses and protruding fins. Below the weapon's design were equations and formulas written in an unfamiliar script. Ethan didn't recognize the language, but he could tell it was important. Very important. Before he could process what he was seeing, the door to his workshop burst open. Startled, Ethan spun around to see Laura Bennett standing there, her wide eyes reflecting the blue glow. Laura was one of the few scientists on Ironhaven. A woman in her late 30s, with short brown hair and a perpetually worried expression. She carried a clipboard tucked under one arm and wore a lab coat stained with coffee spills. "What is that?" she asked, stepping inside. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her usual calm demeanor. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, turning back to the device. "I found it in the wreckage. I think it's part of whatever those aliens were building." Laura moved closer, peering at the holograms. "This looks incredible. You realize what this could mean? If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to replicate it." Ethan frowned. "Replicate it? Laura, we don't even know what it does. For all we know, it could blow us all to pieces." "That's a risk we'll have to take," she said firmly. "You've seen the state of our colony, Ethan. We're barely surviving out here. This could change everything." Ethan wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. Life on Ironhaven was hard, and every day brought new struggles. Supplies were scarce, equipment constantly broke down, and morale was low. If they could harness the power of this alien technology, it might give them a fighting chance, not just against the harsh, it's an environment, but against the Empire itself. But before either of them could say more, a loud rumble shook the ground. Ethan and Laura froze, exchanging nervous glances. The sound of engines roared louder. It's followed by the unmistakable whine of Imperial cruisers descending from the sky. "Oh no," Laura whispered, clutching her clipboard tightly. "They're here?" Ethan's stomach dropped. He didn't need to ask who they were. The Empire rarely visited places like Ironhaven unless they suspected wrongdoing. Scavenging alien tech was strictly forbidden, punishable by imprisonment or worse. Whoever had tipped them off must have known about the device quickly. Ethan grabbed a cloth and threw it over the alien object, dimming the holograms. "We need to hide this," he said urgently. "If they find it, we're done for." Laura nodded, already moving toward the back of the workshop. Together, they shoved the device into a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, covering it with spare parts and tools. Just as they finished, heavy boots echoed outside, and voices shouted orders in clipped tones. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He glanced at Laura, who gave him a reassuring nod before slipping out the side door. Alone now. Ethan picked up a wrench from the workbench and held it loosely in his hand. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. Moments later, the front door slammed open, and a group of Imperial soldiers stormed in, their rifles raised. Leading them was Captain Rachel Monroe, a tall woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes. Her uniform was immaculate, every button polished to a shine, and her posture radiated authority. She scanned the room with cold efficiency, taking in the cluttered workspace and the grease-stained mechanics standing before her. "You're Ethan Cole," she demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Yes," Ethan replied, gripping the wrench tighter. "What do you want?" "We received reports of unauthorized activity involving alien artifacts," Rachel said, stepping closer. "Hand over whatever you've taken from the wreckage, and maybe we'll let you live." Ethan forced himself to meet her gaze, even as his mind raced for a way out of this mess. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, injecting as much confidence into his voice as possible. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix things." Rachel smirked, clearly unconvinced. "A mechanic who happens to specialize in alien technology." She gestured to the shelves filled with strange components and half-built gadgets. "Don't play dumb with me, Cole. You've got something we want, and you're going to give it to us. Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He couldn't let her find the device, it was too dangerous. But how could he possibly stand up to an entire squad of armed soldiers? As if reading his thoughts, Rachel signaled to her men, who began searching the workshop. Ethan watched helplessly as they rifled through his belongings, tossing tools aside and overturning crates. Every second felt like an eternity, each movement bringing them closer to the hidden compartment. And then inspiration struck. Ethan remembered the EMP device he'd been working, an crude prototype designed to disable machinery temporarily. It wasn't ready yet, but it might be enough to buy him some time. Without hesitation, he reached for the device hidden behind a stack of manuals and activated it. The effect was immediate. Lights flickered and died, plunging the workshop into darkness. The soldiers' weapons sputtered and went silent, their advanced systems overwhelmed by the sudden surge of electromagnetic energy. Chaos erupted as shouts filled the air, and Ethan seized his chance. Grabbing the nearest Tula-heavy wrench, he darted past the stunned soldiers and bolted out the door. Asterisk document. Part 2 of the Empire's best face to human mechanic. And lost to a wrench asterisk. Ethan Cole ran as fast as his legs could carry him, weaving through the panicked colonists who filled the narrow streets of Ironhaven. The air was thick, with dust kicked up by Imperial boots and the hum of hovering ships overhead. Behind him, Captain Rachel Monroe shouted orders, her voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Ethan didn't dare look back. He knew she was coming for him, and when she caught up, there would be no excuses, no second chances. He reached the main square, a wide-open space surrounded by crumbling buildings and rusted machinery. It was here that the colonists had gathered, their faces etched with fear and confusion. Some clutched tools or makeshift weapons, while others held children close, shielding them from the commotion. Ethan climbed onto a pile of crates in the center of the square, waving his arms to get everyone's attention. "Listen up," he yelled, his voice carrying over the noise. "They're here because of the alien tech we found. They take it, they'll destroy everything we've worked for. Can't let that happen." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Most of the colonists knew about the scavenged parts but hadn't realized how dangerous they were, now faced with armed soldiers and Imperial cruisers. The reality sank in. A man named Carl, one of the older miners, stepped forward, his face grim. "What do you expect us to do, Ethan?" Carl asked. "We're just farmers and mechanics. They've got guns, ships, and enough firepower to level this whole colony." Ethan clenched his fists, gripping the wrench tighter. He didn't have an answer, not yet, but giving up wasn't an option. "I don't know," he admitted. "But if we don't fight back, they'll take everything. Our homes, our freedom maybe. Even our lives. Is that what you want?" Carl hesitated, glancing at the frightened faces around him. Slowly he shook his head. "No, but we need a plan." Ethan nodded, scanning the crowd. These people weren't fighters, they were survivors. And survival meant using whatever they had to their advantage. "Okay," he said, thinking quickly. "We build defenses. Use scrap metal, old mining equipment, anything we can find. Set up barriers around the perimeter. Make it hard for them to move through the streets." Laura Bennett appeared at the edge of the crowd, her lab coat flapping in the wind. She looked pale but determined. "I'll work on disabling their tech," she added, stepping closer. "If we can disrupt their communications or jam their weapons, it might give us an edge." The colonists murmured among themselves, weighing the risks. Finally someone shouted, "Let's do it!" Echoed the sentiment, raising fists in defiance. For the first time since the Empire arrived, hope flickered in their eyes. While the colonists prepared, Ethan slipped away, heading back toward his workshop. He needed to retrieve the alien device before Rachel and her soldiers found it. The EMP blast had bought him some time, but it wouldn't last forever. As he sprinted through the deserted streets, he kept low, avoiding patrols and sticking to shadows. The crunch of gravel underfoot seemed deafening in the eerie silence left behind by the fleeing colonists. When he reached the workshop, the door hung crookedly on its hinges, splintered wood scattered across the floor. Inside, the place was a mess. Tools lay strewn everywhere, drawers yanked open and emptied. Clearly, Rachel's men had torn the place apart looking for the device. Ethan's stomach churned as he knelt beside the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. He pried it open, relief washing over him when he saw the alien sphere still intact. Grabbing the object, Ethan tucked it under his arm and turned to leave, but froze when he heard footsteps approaching. Heavy boots crunched against gravel outside. There was nowhere to hide, no time to escape. Instead, Ethan grabbed a nearby pipe and stood ready, his heart pounding. Rachel Monroe entered the workshop, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Her gray eyes locked onto Ethan immediately, narrowing with suspicion. "You're persistent," she said, her tone icy. "Most people would have run by now." "Not most people," Ethan shot back, tightening his grip on the pipe. "You're wasting your time. You won't find what you're looking for here." Rachel smirked, taking a step closer. "Oh, I think I will." Her gaze flicked to the floorboards, where faint scuff marks betrayed the hidden compartment. "Hand it over, Cole. This doesn't have to end badly." Ethan shifted his weight, trying to mask his nervousness. "Even if I did have it, Witch. You really think your boss is going to let us live once he gets his hands on it? This isn't about justice, Monroe. It's about control." Rachel's expression hardened. "You don't understand the stakes here. That technology could destabilize entire systems. My job is to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." "Whose hands are those?" Ethan challenged. "Yours? The Empire's? Face it. Monroe's job is just another way of saying you're following orders without asking why." For a moment, Rachel hesitated, her jaw tightening. Then she raised her rifle, pointing it directly at Ethan. "I don't have time for philosophy. Give me the device, or I'll take it from your cold, dead hands." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He couldn't outshoot her, but maybe he could outthink her. With a sudden burst of energy, he swung the pipe like a baseball bat, aiming for the rifle. Rachel reacted instantly, sidestepping the blow and countering with a swift kick to Ethan's side. Pain exploded in his ribs as he stumbled backward, nearly dropping the alien sphere. Rachel lunged forward, grabbing for the device, but Ethan twisted away, slamming his shoulder into her midsection. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, each struggling to gain the upper hand. Despite Rachel's training and strength, Ethan's desperation gave him an unexpected edge. Using the wrench he'd tucked into his belt earlier, he struck her wrist, forcing her to drop the rifle. She cursed under her breath, rolling away to create distance between them, breathing heavily. Ethan scrambled to his feet, clutching the alien sphere tightly. Rachel rose as well, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're making a big mistake," she growled. Drawing a combat knife from her belt, Ethan backed toward the door, his mind racing for a way out. Then inspiration struck. Reaching behind him, he grabbed a loose metal rod leaning against the wall and hurled it at a nearby shelf stacked with heavy tools. The shelf toppled, sending wrenches, hammers, and other implements crashing down in a cacophony of noise. Rachel instinctively ducked. Giving Ethan the opening he needed, with a final surge of adrenaline, Ethan bolted out the door and into the street. Behind him, Rachel shouted curses, but he didn't stop. He sprinted toward the edge of the colony, where the rocky terrain offered better cover. As he ran, he risked a glance over his shoulder and saw Rachel emerge from the workshop, her face a mask of barely contained rage. By the time Ethan reached the outskirts of Ironhaven, the colonists had already begun fortifying their defenses. Scrap metal had been welded together into crude barricades, blocking key intersections and choke points. Old mining drones buzzed overhead, repurposed as surveillance units. Laura stood near the largest barricade, tinkering with a portable EMP generator she'd rigged from spare parts. "Ethan," she called, spotting him as he approached. "Did you get it?" He held up the alien sphere, nodding. "But Monroe knows I have it. She's not going to stop until she gets her hands on it." Laura frowned, glancing toward the direction Ethan had come from. "Then we need to figure out what this thing does, and fast. If it's as powerful as it looks, it might be our only chance." Together they carried the sphere to a secure location, an abandoned storage shed reinforced with steel plates. Inside, Laura set up a workstation, connecting the sphere to a series of monitors and diagnostic tools. The holograms reappeared, casting blue light across the room as the device hummed softly. "This is incredible," Laura muttered, studying the images. "These schematics, they're for some kind of energy weapon. Look at these calculations. Designed to emit a pulse that disables electronics within a certain radius." Ethan leaned closer, squinting at the diagrams. "So it's like an EMP, but stronger?" "Much stronger," Laura confirmed. "If we can activate it, we might be able to disable their ships and weapons. But—" she hesitated, biting her lip. "There's a catch. Activating it requires solving these equations. I don't recognize half the symbols." Ethan groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Great. So we've got a super weapon we can't use." "We'll figure it out," Laura insisted, her voice firm despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "We have to." As they worked, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the colony. The Imperial forces had begun their assault, testing the colonists' defenses with probing attacks. Gunfire crackled in the distance, accompanied by shouts and screams. Ethan clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him. He'd started this fight, dragged his people into it, and now they were paying the price. Outside, Rachel Monroe led her troops through the narrow streets, methodically dismantling the colonists' barricades. Her frustration mounted with every passing minute. What could a bunch of ragtag humans hold their own against trained Imperial soldiers? Every time she thought she had the upper hand, Ethan Cole slipped through her fingers like smoke. Still, Rachel refused to admit defeat.
Ow.
She had spent years proving herself in the Empire's ranks, rising to become one of its most trusted enforcers. Failure was not an option. Not here, not now. *** document. Part 3 of the Empire's best faced a human mechanic. And lost to a wrench ***, the battle for Ironhaven raged on. The sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing through the colony like a storm that refused to pass. Ethan Cole and Laura Bennett remained huddled in the dimly lit storage shed, their focus entirely consumed by the alien sphere glowing softly in front of them. The device pulsed with energy, its holograms casting eerie blue light across their faces as they worked tirelessly to decipher its secrets. Laura's fingers flew over her tablet, inputting data and running simulations while Ethan studied the symbols etched into the sphere's surface. "These equations are unlike anything I've ever seen," she muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. "It's like they're written in a language designed to make us think differently." Ethan leaned closer, squinting at the holographic display. "Maybe it's not just math," he suggested. "What if it's logic, patterns or sequences we're supposed to follow?" Laura paused, considering his words. That could work. Some advanced alien tech operates on principles humans wouldn't normally consider. "Let me try rearranging the variables based on sequence instead of function."
Nice.
As she adjusted the settings, the hologram shifted, revealing new layers of information. A series of interconnected nodes appeared, glowing brighter as Laura manipulated the equations. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They were getting closer, but time was slipping away. Outside, the Imperial forces pressed their attack. Captain Rachel Monroe led her troops with precision, dismantling barricades and clearing buildings one by one. Her soldiers moved in tight formations, their weapons trained on every shadow. Despite their superior training and firepower, the colonists' improvised defenses slowed their advance. Mining drones buzzed overhead, dropping rocks and debris onto patrols, while hidden traps snared unsuspecting soldiers. Rachel gritted her teeth, growing increasingly impatient. She had expected this to be a quick mission, a show of force to remind the colonists who held the power. Instead, she found herself locked in a grueling fight against people armed with little more than scrap metal and determination. And at the center of it all was Ethan Cole, a mechanic who seemed determined to outwit her at every turn. "He's here somewhere," Rachel muttered to Lieutenant Peters, her second in command. "Find him. Bring me that deviceor. Bring me his head." Peters nodded sharply and signaled for a squad to fan out, searching the surrounding area. Rachel stayed behind, surveying the battlefield from a vantage point atop a crumbling building. From this height, she could see the full extent of the colony's resistance. Barricades lined the streets, reinforced with steel beams and chunks of concrete. Colonists darted between cover, using makeshift weapons to harass her troops. It was chaos, but there was a method to it, strategy born of desperation. Rachel clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. She hated being underestimated, especially by someone like Ethan Cole. To her, he was nothing more than a glorified tinkerer, a man whose greatest achievement was fixing broken machines. Yet somehow, he had managed to rally an entire colony against the Emperor, and now he dared to challenge her authority. Back in the storage shed, Ethan and Laura finally made progress. After hours of trial and error, they unlocked a critical function of the alien sphere. The device emitted a low hum, and the holograms expanded, forming a three-dimensional map of the colony. Icons representing Imperial forces blinked red, while blue markers indicated the colonists' positions. "This is incredible," Laura whispered, awe evident in her voice. "It's showing us their movements in real time." Ethan's eyes widened as he studied the map. "If we can use this to predict where they'll strike next, we might be able to hold them off long enough to activate the weapon," Laura nodded. Typing furiously on her tablet, "I'll relay this information to the others. We need to coordinate our efforts." Before she could leave, Ethan grabbed her arm. "Wait, what about activating the weapon itself? Do you think we're close?" Laura hesitated, glancing at the sphere. "We've solved part of it, but there's still one equation left. If we get that wrong, it could overload the system or worse, destroy the colony." Ethan exhaled slowly. Weighing the risks, they couldn't afford to wait much longer. Outside, the sounds of combat grew louder, closer. The Imperial forces were advancing steadily, pushing deeper into the colony. "We don't have a choice," Ethan said firmly. "Keep working on the equation. I'll go help the others." Laura opened her mouth to protest, but stopped herself. She knew Ethan was right. They needed all hands on deck if they were going to survive. "Be careful," she said simply. "I will," Ethan replied, grabbing his wrench before stepping out into the fray. The streets of Ironhaven were a war zone. Smoke filled the air, stinging Ethan's eyes as he navigated the wreckage. He spotted a group of colonists huddled behind a barricade, fending off a wave of Imperial soldiers. Without hesitation, Ethan joined them, swinging his wrench with surprising skill. His blows landed hard and fast, disarming one soldier and knocking another off balance. "Fall back," Ethan shouted to the colonists. "They're trying to flank us." The group obeyed, retreating to a secondary position while Ethan covered their escape. Bullets whizzed past his head, striking sparks off nearby metal. He ducked behind a pile of scrap and took stock of the situation. The Imperial forces were relentless, pushing forward with mechanical efficiency. But the colonists fought with raw emotion, driven by the desire to protect their home, as Ethan regrouped with the others. Carl approached him, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "How's it going with the device?" he asked, reloading his makeshift rifle. "We're close," Ethan replied. "But we need more time. Can you keep them busy?" Carl nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can." Ethan patted him on the shoulder and moved on, heading toward the main square. Along the way, he encountered pockets of resistance, small groups of colonists holding key intersections and choke points. Each victory, no matter how minor, boosted morale. For the first time in years, the people of Ironhaven felt united, their shared purpose stronger than any weapon. Meanwhile, Rachel Monroe continued her relentless pursuit of Ethan. She had tracked him to the edge of the colony, where the rocky terrain made movement difficult. Her boots crunched against gravel as she climbed higher, scanning the landscape below. Through her visor, she spotted flashes of light, gunfire, and followed the trail. When she reached the source, she found a group of colonists setting up explosives along a narrow path. They hadn't noticed her yet, too focused on their task. Rachel signaled for her team to take cover, then raised her rifle and fired a single shot. The sound echoed through the canyon, startling the colonists and drawing their attention. "You're persistent," Ethan's voice called out, seemingly from nowhere. He stepped out from behind a boulder, his wrench held loosely at his side. "But you're wasting your time, Monroe. You won't win this fight." Rachel smirked, lowering her rifle slightly. You really think you can beat the Empire with? A bunch of farmers and mechanics? This isn't a game, Cole. Surrender now, and I might let some of your people live. Ethan shook his head, his expression resolute. You don't understand. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who's ever been crushed under your Empire's boot. If we give up, we're telling them it's okay to keep doing what they're doing, and I won't let that happen. Rachel's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. For a moment, she almost believed him. Almost. Then she shook her head, banishing the thought. You're delusional, she snapped. Idealism won't save you. With that, she raised her rifle again and fired. Ethan dove for cover, narrowly avoiding the blast. The battle resumed, each side trading shots and maneuvers. Rachel's soldiers pushed forward, forcing the colonists to retreat further into the rocky terrain, but Ethan refused to give up. Every step backward was calculated, every move designed to buy Laura more time. Inside the storage shed, Laura worked feverishly, her fingers trembling as she input the final variables into the alien. Sweat dripped down her face, mixing with the dust on her skin. The equations were complex, almost maddening, but she could feel the solution within reach. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sphere emitted a soft chime. The hologram shifted once more, displaying a countdown timer. Laura stared at it, her heart pounding. It's done, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. We did it. She grabbed her communicator and broadcasted a message to the entire colony. Everyone fall back to the main square. Pete, fall back to the main square. The weapon is ready. Out in the field, Ethan heard the transmission and smiled despite the chaos around him. He rallied the remaining colonists, leading them toward the designated location. Behind them, Rachel Monroe watched as the resistance withdrew, confusion clouding her features. What are they planning? She muttered, raising her visor to get a better look. Seconds later, the alien sphere activated. A massive pulse of energy rippled outward, engulfing the colony in a blinding flash of blue light. Imperial ships hovering above suddenly shuddered and went dark, their engines sputtering as systems failed. Weapons jammed, communications cut off, and soldiers froze in place, their gear rendered useless. In the aftermath, silence fell over Ironhaven. The colonists emerged cautiously from their hiding spots, staring in disbelief at the document, Part 4 of the Empire's best faced a human mechanic. And lost to a wrench, the alien sphere's pulse had turned the tide of battle, but the victory was far from complete. The colonists of Ironhaven stood in stunned silence as the Empire's soldiers struggled to regain control of their disabled equipment. Ships hung motionless in the sky, their once menacing forms now powerless and vulnerable. Imperial troops milled about aimlessly, their weapons useless, and their communication lines severed. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's grip on its subjects faltered. Ethan Cole stood at the center of it all, his chest heaving with exhaustion. His hands were blackened with grease and dirt, and his face bore scratches from the fight. Despite the chaos around him, there was a spark of triumph in his eyes. He glanced down at the alien sphere, still glowing faintly in his arms. We did it, he whispered to himself, though the weight of what came next pressed heavily on his shoulders. Laura Bennett approached him, her lab coat torn and streaked with grime. Her face was pale but determined. It worked, she said, her voice trembling with equal parts relief and disbelief. But we can't celebrate yet. They'll regroup. And when they do, they'll come back stronger. Ethan nodded grimly. I know. He looked around at the colonists gathering in the square, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and hope. We need to prepare for whatever comes next. Before he could say more, Carl stepped forward, holding a makeshift rifle slung over his shoulder. What do we do now? He asked, his voice rough but steady. They might be down for now, but you think they're just going to walk away? No, Ethan replied, his tone firm. This is only the beginning. We hit them hard, but they'll want revenge. We need to fortify the colony, build better defenses, stockpile supplies, and figure out how to use this thing properly. He gestured toward the alien sphere. If we can replicate its effects, we might stand a chance against another attack. Carl exchanged glances with the other colonists before nodding. All right, you heard him. Let's get to work. As the crowd dispersed, Laura pulled Ethan aside. There's something else we need to consider, she said quietly. That pulse didn't just disable their tech, it disrupted everything within range, including ours. Ethan frowned. I mean, Laura explained. Our mining equipment, generators, even basic tools, they're all fried. It'll take days, maybe weeks, to repair everything. And without power, we're sitting ducks if they decide to strike again. Ethan cursed under his breath. He hadn't thought about the collateral damage. Then we fix it, he said firmly. We've got no choice. Divide everyone into teams, some to repair our gear, others to keep watch in case the Empire tries anything. Laura hesitated, then nodded. I'll start organizing the tech team. We'll prioritize getting the generator back online first. Good, Ethan replied. And while you're doing that, I'll deal with Monroe. Rachel Monroe sat on the ground near the edge of the colony, her rifle resting uselessly beside her. Around her, Imperial soldiers fumbled with their equipment, trying desperately to reboot systems that refused to respond. The humiliation burned deep within her, a bitter taste she couldn't swallow. She had been sent to crush a rebellion led by a ragtag group of humans and, instead, she'd been humiliated by a mechanic wielding nothing more than a wrench and an alien artifact. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. How could this have happened? She was Captain Rachel Monroe, one of the Empire's finest officers. Yet here she was, defeated by people who should have been beneath her notice.
Worse still.
She couldn't shake the words Ethan had spoken during their last confrontation. Maybe it's time someone taught them how. Her thoughts were interrupted when Commander Victor Hale's voice crackled through her damaged earpiece. Monroe, report. What is your status? Rachel hesitated, gripping the communicator tightly. Commander, the situation is compromised, she admitted, choosing her words carefully. The colonists activated some kind of alien device. It disabled our ships and weapons. We're cut off until repairs can be made. There was a long pause on the other end. Spoke again. His tone was icy. Compromised? You let a bunch of farmers and mechanics disable an entire battalion? Do you have any idea what this means for the Empire? Rachel swallowed hard, anger flaring inside her. Sir, I understand the gravity of the situation, but the colonists are using advanced alien technology. It's unpredictable and beyond our current understanding. I need reinforcements and engineers to counteract its effects. Hale's voice grew colder. Reinforcements are en route. In the meantime, secure the device and neutralize the threat. Failure will not be tolerated, Monroe. The line went dead, leaving Rachel staring at the communicator in her hand. Those 3 words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. If she failed to retrieve the alien sphere, she would face consequences far worse than defeat. The Empire did not forgive failure, not from anyone. Ethan found Rachel near the outskirts of the colony, seated on a rock with her head bowed. At first glance, she looked defeated, but Ethan knew better than to underestimate her. He approached cautiously, keeping the alien sphere close to his chest. Monroe, he called out, his voice steady. Rachel looked up, her gray eyes narrowing as she spotted him. Cole, she spat, rising to her feet. You've made a big mistake. Ethan stopped a few paces away, his grip tightening on the sphere. No, Monroe, the mistake was yours. Came here thinking you could scare us into submission. But we're not afraid of you or your empire. Rachel took a step closer, her expression darkening. You think this changes anything? That little stunt of yours bought you some time, but it doesn't change the fact that you're outnumbered and outgunned. Reinforcements are already on the way. When they arrive, there won't be anything left of this colony. Ethan met her, gaze unflinching. Maybe, but until then, you're stuck here with us. And trust me, we're not going down without a fight. Rachel smirked, though there was no humor in it. Brave words for someone who spends most of his time fixing broken machines. Tell me, Cole, how does it feel knowing you've signed your people's death warrant? It feels like freedom, Ethan shot back. Something you wouldn't understand. Rachel's jaw tightened, and for a moment it seemed like she might lunge at him. Instead, she forced herself to relax, crossing her arms over her chest. You're smarter than you look. I'll give you that. But smart doesn't mean invincible. Now, sooner or later, you'll slip up, and when you do, I'll be there to finish what I started. Ethan shook his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about me or you. It's about proving that humanity isn't something to be crushed underfoot. We're stronger than you think. Rachel studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. You're wasting your time, Cole. The Empire doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It conquers. And no amount of clever engineering or half-baked philosophies will change that. Maybe not, Ethan admitted. But it's worth fighting for anyway. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing alone amidst the wreckage. As he rejoined the colonists working to repair their damaged equipment, he couldn't help but glance back at her. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of doubt. Perhaps that gave him pause. Was it possible that she wasn't as loyal to the Empire as she claimed? Back in the storage shed, Laura and her team worked tirelessly to restore power to the colony. Generators sputtered and coughed as they attempted to reboot, their circuits fried by the alien pulse. Tools lay scattered across the floor, and sparks occasionally flew as wires were reconnected. Despite the setbacks, progress was being made. We're almost there, Laura announced, wiping sweat from her brow. Another hour, maybe 2, and we'll have partial power restored. That's good, Ethan said, leaning against the wall. Because we're going to need every advantage we can get. Laura glanced at him, concern etched on her face. Now, do you really think they'll send reinforcements? I don't think they will, Ethan replied. And when they come, they'll bring everything they've got. We can't afford to. Let our guard down. Laura nodded, turning back to her work. Then we'd better make sure we're ready. As the hours passed, the colonists rallied together, repairing machinery, reinforcing barricades, and preparing for the inevitable counterattack. Ethan moved among them, offering encouragement and lending a hand wherever needed. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of unity in the era-shared purpose that bound them together. Meanwhile, Rachel Monroe retreated to the relative safety of the disabled Imperial cruiser. Though her pride was wounded, her resolve remained unshaken. She contacted Commander Hale again, providing a detailed report of the situation. By the time she finished, reinforcements were already en route, along with a team of elite engineers tasked with countering the alien technology. As night fell over Ironhaven, the colony braced itself for what lay ahead. The Empire's wrath was coming, and when it arrived, the stakes would be higher than ever. But for now, Ethan and his people had won a small but significant victory. A reminder that even the smallest acts of defiance could spark a revolution. Somewhere deep within the heart of the Empire, Emperor Alaric Kane watched the unfolding events with growing interest. *** document. Part 5 of the Empire's best face to human mechanic. And lost to a wrench. ***. The night settled over Ironhaven, blanketing the colony in darkness. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of burnt metal from the disabled Imperial ships still hanging lifelessly above. Stars twinkled faintly in the sky, their light dimmed by the orange haze of the nearby sun. For the colonists, the quiet was both a relief and a warning. They had won a temporary victory, but everyone knew the Empire would not stay silent for long. Ethan Cole stood near the edge of the main square. Staring up at the motionless cruisers, his mind raced with questions. How much time did they have? Before reinforcements arrived, would the alien sphere be enough to hold them off again? Most importantly, could the colonists keep fighting when the odds were stacked so heavily against them? Laura Bennett joined him, breaking his train of thought. She carried a clipboard tucked under one arm, her face lined with exhaustion but still focused. We've got partial power back, she said, her voice low. Enough to run the basic systems, at least. But it's not stable. If we push it too hard, we risk another blackout. Ethan nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. It's better than nothing. At least we can start getting some of the defenses online again. Yeah, Laura agreed, though her tone was cautious. But Ethan, there's something else. Some of the colonists are starting to lose hope. They're scared. What if the Empire brings more ships? More soldiers? We barely held them off this time, Ethan sighed, glancing at the people scattered around the square. Many were busy repairing equipment or setting up barricades, but others sat quietly, their faces etched with worry. He understood their fear. It was hard not to feel overwhelmed when facing an enemy as powerful as the Empire. But giving up wasn't an option. We remind them why we're fighting, Ethan said firmly. This isn't just about us. It's about showing the Empire that humanity isn't something to be crushed. Every colony out there is watching what happens here. If we give up now, it sends a message that resistance is pointless. Laura hesitated, then nodded slowly. You're right. But how do we convince them? Words aren't going to fix everything. We lead by example, Ethan replied. We show them that we're willing to fight no matter what. That's how we inspire them. Before Laura could respond, Carl approached, his face grim. Ethan, we've got a problem. One of the scouts spotted movement outside the colony. It looks like Monroe's trying to regroup her forces. Ethan straightened, his jaw tightening. Where? Near the old mining tunnels, Carl answered. She's got a small team with her, probably planning to flank us. Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. All right, we'll deal with it. Get everyone ready in case they try anything. And make sure the EMP generator is charged. It might come in handy. Carl nodded and hurried off, leaving Ethan and Laura alone. Again, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. I'm going after Monroe. If we can stop her now, it'll buy us more time. You can't go alone, Laura protested. She's dangerous, Ethan. You saw what she's capable of. I won't be alone, Ethan countered. I'll take a few people with me, just enough to handle her squad without drawing too much attention. Laura opened her mouth to argue further, but stopped herself. She knew Ethan well enough to recognize the stubborn set of his shoulders. Once he made up his mind, there was no changing it. Be careful, she said finally. If anything happens to you, we're finished. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile. Don't worry. I'm not planning on dying today. Rachel Monroe moved silently through the darkened mining tunnels, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Behind her, a handful of soldiers followed, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath their boots. The tunnels were narrow and damp, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. It wasn't ideal terrain, but it offered cover on. That was exactly what Rachel needed. Her plan was simple. Circle around the colony, find a weak point in their defenses, and strike quickly. She didn't have the numbers or resources to launch a full-scale assault, but she didn't need them. A surgical hit would be enough to destabilize the colonists' fragile morale. And if she could capture Ethan Kalor, the aliens fear she might yet salvage. This disaster, as they reached the end of the tunnel, Rachel signaled for her team to halt. Peering out into the night, she scanned the colony's perimeter. Barricades lined the streets, reinforced with scrap metal and debris. Spotlights mounted on rooftops swept across the area, casting long shadows that danced eerily in the dim light. It was clear the colonists were prepared for another attack, but preparation didn't guarantee success. Rachel smirked to herself. These people might have surprised her once. They wouldn't get the chance again. Ethan led a small group of colonists toward the mining tunnels. Moving cautiously through the rocky terrain, each step was deliberate, their movements slow, and measured to avoid detection. Ethan carried the alien sphere in a makeshift satchel slung over his shoulder, its faint glow hidden beneath layers of cloth. Beside him, two other colonists, Jake, a young miner with a knack for explosives, and Maria, a former security officer, kept watch, their weapons ready. When they reached the entrance to the tunnels, Ethan raised a hand, signaling for silence. He knelt down, examining the ground for signs of recent activity. Sure enough, fresh footprints marked the dirt, leading deeper into the darkness. They're in there, he whispered, turning to Jake and Maria. Stay close. We don't know how many there are. The trio slipped into the tunnel, their flashlights casting narrow beams of light onto the walls. The air grew colder as they ventured further, the sound of dripping water echoing softly in the confined space. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But he pushed forward, knowing what was at stake. After Several minutes of tense searching, they spotted movement ahead, a faint glimmer of light reflecting off armor. Ethan signaled for Jake and Maria to take positions on either side of the tunnel while he crept closer. Gripping his wrench tightly, Rachel heard them before she saw them, the subtle crunch of gravel underfoot, the almost imperceptible shift of weight. She spun around, raising her rifle, only to find Ethan standing a few paces away, his expression calm despite the danger. "Monroe," Ethan said evenly, "you really think sneaking around in the dark is going to change anything?" Rachel lowered her weapon slightly, her lips curling into a smirk. "Cole, always full of surprises, aren't you? Should have known you'd follow me." "I'm not the one who likes playing games," Ethan shot back. "If you want to fight, fine, but leave my people out of it." Rachel's smirk faded, replaced by a cold glare. "Your people brought this on themselves. All they had to do was hand over the device. Instead, they chose to resist." "And they'll keep resisting," Ethan replied, his voice firm, "because they're not afraid of your empire." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Rachel raised her rifle again, aiming directly at Ethan. "You're brave, Cole. I'll give you that. But bravery won't save you." Before she could fire, Jake detonated a small charge he'd planted earlier, causing a section of the tunnel to collapse between them. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding everyone inside. Ethan grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her back toward the entrance as shouts erupted behind them. "Let's go," Ethan yelled, leading the way out of the tunnel. Behind them, Rachel cursed, ordering her soldiers to dig through the rubble. By the time they emerged into the open air, Ethan and his team were already halfway back to the colony, back in the main square. The colonists cheered when they saw Ethan return unharmed. Laura rushed over, her face pale with worry. "Did you stop her?" she asked breathlessly. "For now," Ethan replied, brushing dust off his jacket, "but she's not done yet. We need to be ready." As the colonists resumed their preparations, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had managed to thwart Rachel's plan for now, but he knew the battle was far from over. The Empire's reinforcements were coming, and when they arrived, the stakes would be higher than ever. In the distance, Rachel Monroe stood atop a ridge overlooking the colony, her eyes blazing with determination. The collapse of the tunnel had slowed her down, but it hadn't broken her resolve. She would find a way to reclaim the alien sphere and crush the rebellion once and for all. For Ethan Cole and the people of Ironhaven, the fight was only beginning. But as long as they stood together, they had a chance. And sometimes that was all anyone needed to keep going. End of Part 5.